Good morning, buddy. How you doing, Chris?
Good morning, Anthony. How are you? Happy Tuesday to you. Give me some sort of good news.
I am absolutely giddy over my dad joke this morning.
All right.
And it's only if you're younger than 30, you're not going to get it. But if you're older than 30, you're going to really appreciate it. You ready for it?
Yes, we're huge in the senior citizen community. So
we are.
This is gonna be great.
Well,
Yeah.
if you're 32, you're not a senior citizen.
I don't know, but I mean, it feels like that way sometimes if you're 32.
Did you know, Chris, that that they don't watch the Flintstones in Dubai, but Abu Dhabi do? It's good, right? It's good.
Oh my God, that is.
Yep.
Hold on, I'm gonna golf clap.
It's almost as good as my peekaboo one.
God. All right, to answer that, there's only one joke that I can get to because we were talking a little bit about science and research before we came on, and I'll tell you, I actually do read science articles. I was reading this one article about gravity. I could not put it down.
That was a heavy one, Chris.
Oh, you're on fire this morning.
How you doing?
How you doing? Oh, Anthony, what if the infrastructure protecting you from scale is the reason you can't afford to reach it? Basecamp's founder publicly abandoned the cloud in 2022, moving to own servers after calculating they'd spent $3.2 million annually on AWS. Their hearsay, they measured actual usage against what they were paying for and found the gap embarrassing. Today on How to Founder, we're going to be talking about cloud infrastructure and optimization, but generally about overbuilding for startups. We build too much stuff, don't we? Sometimes, often, that we don't need. We're joined by a guy from Texas, Mr. Vidar Hokstad. No, but are you a little Texas? Like, it's a little bit crazy too?
Well, maybe. Okay. You know,
I will set you
crazy to do startups.
Yeah, also, to come on a podcast with the two of us. I agree. Vidar Hokstad runs Hokstad Consulting, where he helps startups and scale-ups stop over-engineering their infrastructure. He spent 25 years building systems and has a reputation for calling out cargo culting when founders copy big tech architecture without big tech traffic. Even before I asked the first question, explain what Texas means in Norwegian and what cargo culting is, because both of them are fascinating.
Okay, so Texas in Norwegian means crazy. We use it as a general term for crazy. And yes, it refers to the state. It's not just a word that sounds the same.
No, I mean, that's exactly, I told Vidar, that's exactly how Anthony refers to me as well. It's like, oh, he's just Texas. So
so Texas means crazy, and it's not a Norwegian word. You're just referring to.
We are referring to the states, yes.
Yeah. I can't disagree with, as a native Texan, I can't disagree with that whatsoever. All right,
it's a little bit of a cheeky one because you can talk about it. You can, for example, call a party completely Texas. It's a great party. It was completely crazy. That kind of thing. It's not necessarily insane. Just to clarify that.
I think Vidar is going to call his friends and be like, "I was just on this podcast. It was so Texas.
It was Texas. Exactly right.
Texas. Oh my God, I can't believe. All right, what is cargo culting? Because you just explained it to me. I had no idea.
So cargo culting is a term that goes back to basically supply drops in the Pacific and locals that in some cases started copying it without copying basically the motions that the people on the runway did. without understanding why, hoping that it would bring, supplies falling down from the sky.
It's like
So
just
it's basically,
mythology, right? Like you
yeah,
just
exactly.
do
So it's
things,
forming a cult around ceremony without understanding why it is performed and what conditions it applies.
It's interesting. I've now learned two things, Anthony, which you've taught me on 100 and something episodes. So it's pretty good. Get to the theme before we actually start talking about cloud computing here, because there's a psychology behind this that I want to talk about, which is founders overbuild. Cargo culting, I love the analogy here, because we oftentimes think that our startup needs to be a huge company, and we try to structure our finance, we structure our systems, our policies and procedures like we're a big company when there's 4 of us in the room. Why don't we do that, Vidar? Like, why is we're a small company, we don't necessarily need to overbuild? Is it
part of it, I think, is that people get told to. There's a lot of, obviously, partly because you get people who will come from a bigger company background and where they're used to thinking about measuring capacity and thinking about it in those terms, and partly because, well, you want to make it big as a startup founder, right? You want to reach those high goals, and that message that tends to get communicated to everybody you bring on. But you don't necessarily, and this is one of my pet peeves, is I've worked in VC for a few years, and one of the things that I see was that, well, people had thought about these things in their pitch decks. And on the other hand, when I worked in various companies over the years, I've never had the same vision that was present in the pitch deck that the founders who have gone out raising capital on presented to the regular staff in the tech, in the tech team. So people are building these things, and it's often a game of telephone that's gone like multiple levels from the vision that was presented to the VCs via communicated to the CTO, to head of development, to developers, and it's changed every step of the way. And so you think that you need to build this massive thing, even when the vision might be much smaller.
Anthony, you ever fallen victim to this? I have. Overbuilding, infrastructure that you don't necessarily need, whether it's, computing or anything else.
I have never regretted overbuilding. Ironically, this is kind of funny, because when I don't build the same thing over and over again. I always overbuild, but I do always overbuild, and I view it not as a waste of time. It's me learning the space, and the architecture is thinking through. And so it helps me think through the details when I'm over engineering things, and I've never regretted it, ironically.
So thinking through the details is great. Yeah. Thinking through it is great. But I think that where the overbuilding tends to be a problem is especially early stages, where you're tight on touch, and where overbuilding can mean that you never make it to the next stage.
Look, I'm gonna pull on something here though, Chris. So, Vidar said something that, early stage founders do this, but our opening example, right, Basecamp, they were spending $3.2 million annually in AWS, so they decided to bring it in house. Do you know what Basecamp's revenue is?
I don't know, billions probably.
It's $280 million. So basically 1.5% of their revenue was COGS. And the CEO was involved in the decision of saving like maybe 0.5% of their COGS. I think that was, I don't know the entire story behind it, but on the face of it, that seems like a waste. That seems like, why are you engineering that internally in the headache and not using AWS?
So I think go ahead. But I think that the frame of the question here is I've been on the other side of this, where my AWS bill, we were not using our entire infrastructure, and was bleeding us dry. Like, it was genuinely a huge line item expense because my engineering team was building for a scale that we wouldn't have reached in 4 to 5 years. I mean, is that sort of what we're talking about, Vidar?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. I have some concrete examples there where I've seen clients that have been building for a scale that there's no possibility of them ever achieving, because the market they were building for wasn't as big as the capacity they were building for. And it's like, if you have done the maths, and there is a realistic chance that you might be making it to that scale too fast for you to be able to turn around and change things later, then that's fine. But you really should at least have a handle on, okay, how big is your market? There will be projections in the pitch decks that you've gone to the VCs with, because they want to know that you're actually building for a market that is large enough. And you will have been estimating, well, how much of that market is actually obtainable. Now, if your tech team goes around and builds for a scale 10 times that because you haven't communicated things to them, you are going to be bleeding dry much quicker than you need to, and you're going to go out and need to raise more cash. And remember, cash at the early stage is expensive. You're giving up a large chunk of your company for that cash.
I want to
Later stages like Basecamp, it's less important, right?
Yeah.
But this is a fundamental truism, and I don't think it's just true in the world of technology startups, Anthony. I do believe that this is true for all companies, which is it's a terrible idea to let engineers go build something without telling them what to build at what scale and why. And so if you let an engineering team, and this is exactly what happened to me, a bunch of very big brained, very smart people, they got together and decided they need to build this crazy infrastructure because it was cool. It was neat. They wanted to have it. They wanted to be able to say, this is what they did. They wanted to be able to tell their friends. And really, the company was never going to be able to reach the scale and did not need that size of infrastructure. Vidar, is that common?
Oh, I mean, I see a lot of people, a lot of development teams where you have like all of these different tensions where people want to play with a given technology, for example, and they're inventing justifications for it, and they need to be reined in. But a lot of the time, people also just genuinely think that is how you scale because they don't necessarily know. And nobody is telling them that, no, you cannot roll out 5 Kubernetes clusters for an application that's going to have 100 customers. It's like they have been told that you need these things to reach scale, and haven't invested that time in learning otherwise, because, well, why would they? Everybody is using this technology, and when you're looking at Kubernetes, because it is a pet peeve of mine. Kubernetes was modeled by Google after their internal deployment solution, Borg. And it's built to be able to deploy things at Google scale. Now, it scales down quite far. You can run it on really small systems, but it's also really, really complicated. And sometimes that complexity is justified, but a lot of times it's not.
Well, here's the fundamental truth, Chris. No matter what you build first, you're going to rebuild it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
The most famous example of this, and we all know it because we've been around the world of technology for so long, is that Twitter famously, when it had the blue whale,
I knew you were going to
constantly failed. It's just because it's such a prime example that when Twitter, I think they raised their B round, they had 2 engineering teams side by side, and one of them was just trying to keep this thing alive while their other engineering team was actually building the thing behind it. But I don't know that's necessarily bad. I mean, I think
that's the way it's supposed to happen. Right. No, that's the way it's supposed to happen.
The interesting thing with that is obviously they survived it, and it cost them very little to stand up their initial solution because it was thrown together. And funnily enough, their initial platform was running on Rails by the company behind Basecamp.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a Ruby on Rails app. That is right.
Yeah.
I want to flip this around just for a second, Anthony, because at the heart of this question is this idea of product and scale and the natural tension between product and engineering. And in all of the companies, and genuinely, you're one of the best product minds that I know. You think through products incredibly deeply, but to your own piece, you overbuild those products, I think, sometimes to try to discover what this product wants it to be. So give me the counter use case here. I mean, like if scale, we don't want to overpay for scale, but at the same time, sometimes you don't know what this product wants to be when it grows up.
That's an interesting question. So I'm thinking about this in this way, Chris. So, I over-engineer things that I don't want to do manually. So, if I'll give you a really good example. So, Wiser Method, the Wiser Method website I'm building out, and I'm building a CRM, and I'm transferring from Go High Level to Zoho, believe it or not, as the CRM. And the reason is because Go High Level had a very bad API, and I was doing a lot of things manually in Go High Level, having to visually create workflows. And I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to work through each workflow that I needed to do in Go High Level. So I researched what CRM had the best API for its workflow, so I could just do it in Cursor and automate everything that I need to do. So I way over engineered this migration and this transition, because I know in the future I can just write a couple of prompt and it creates what I need instead of me having to manually do it. So I over engineered it, knowing my own laziness.
I think you're the only person that would gladly spend 4 hours writing prompts and engineering something that would take you 1 hour to do. Like you would just, you love, be like,
No.
on the off chance you have to do it again in the future.
No, not maybe, but I mean, let's take a look at the podcast, right? So I automated a lot of stuff for the podcast, but if I didn't, we wouldn't be 183 episodes in, because I wouldn't want to
100%.
continue to do it.
Yeah, there's no way none of it.
No way would we manually do it. So in that circumstance, I over engineered it to our audience's detriment, not to ours.
To Vidar's going like, oh, I wish it was stopped at 182. That's
I think, yeah. So I think that kind of over engineering though is quite different, because it's like you are making a one-off time investment, and that it may take a while to pay back, but it's increasing your velocity afterwards. And that's like a better trade-off than going off and building a like a 50 server large installation for something that needs one, right? That's I think, because then you are doing the reverse. You're creating an ongoing cost for yourself, and you need to drive accordingly more revenue to pay for it.
I want to get in and let's take a left turn into AI, because Anthony, I've got your co-founder agent system pulled up to my right here. I'm using it every single day now. We live in a world that's incredibly interesting. So at this moment, what's happened, all these companies that said that they were AI driven, that were basically an API call into OpenAI, they're not really gaining traction. The big AI guys are still going. There is, however, this world where I, never being last language I was sufficient in was basic. I can go build an app in a weekend that's an MVP. And that's an incredible moment in time for people that like to build products and like to test things, et cetera. But Vidar, like, what does that mean? And how do we, as people that want to go build something fast and test, et cetera, what does that mean? It's kind of the opposite of this question we're talking about, like overbuilding. This would be underbuilding.
So I think, yes, I mean, it's an interesting one, because I'm using these models a lot. I'm just worried about hitting my weekly limit on my most expensive Cloud Max subscription every week, kind of thing. I'm using a lot of agents, and I think, yeah, it's a way of staying lean, building things with much smaller teams, and avoiding a lot of those scaling issues, because there's a lot of things that you can test out with agents, even without building out a proper, that this is not going to scale necessarily. You're not going to be able to farm everything off to Claude in production, but for a large user base. But you can avoid automating a lot of things entirely by just feeding them into these models and having models, use tool calls and stuff like that. So I'm more and more expecting us to head to a point where we're moving up from just the coding and to much more structural agents that are handling more strategic ideation and stuff like that. Whereas I see a lot of developers that are still struggling with giving up control and letting Claude or Copilot stuff like that do things without asking permission every 5 seconds.
Well, I am curious also because in my experience, I'm using cloud computing, even just for my own little stuff that I'm doing, it's incredibly inexpensive.
It really depends. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that because Chris, you mentioned AWS was killing you, but you weren't using it to an extent. How do you get to an infrastructure that's not variably scaling with your business? Like, how do founders do that, Vidar? How do you scale in the cloud inexpensively?
So I think the first thing is that people tend to overestimate how much their demand varies with time zones and stuff like that. And if you're looking at if you're looking at somebody who's genuinely just offering services that most people will access during waking hours in a small region, that might be the case, and they can scale everything down to near nothing at night and stuff like that. But most people will have curves that are flattened out so much by global demand that it doesn't really buy all that much variable scaling. If you scale down your development environments, you can often save more and stuff like that. But then that's the counter to that is that hardware on AWS alone costs like twice as much as what it costs from cheaper providers. Bandwidth costs 50 times as much, 50 times as much than what you get from smaller providers, and 5 to 10 times more than even smaller, relatively large cloud providers. Like if you're serving lots of outbound bandwidth, you would cut your bills to a fifth just by moving to DigitalOcean, for example. But you can cut them far more by going somewhere else. So it really depends on what you're doing, and a lot of people. The biggest problem with cloud computing there for a lot of people isn't necessarily that they're in the cloud, but that they're in the cloud and not paying attention. Because I think the greatest genius of AWS was that they took control from the CFOs. They got to the point where people didn't anymore have to fill in a form, ask for budget, get approval before they spin up servers. They have an API. They spin up servers whenever they want to, and then the CFO comes crying to them afterwards when the bills come due. And it was the most genius move Amazon made there, was basically getting to a point where the people who love spinning up servers and don't care about the costs are sitting with the control.
I want to ask a question that's related, but it's more for a founder perspective right now. And I want to get both of your perspectives. So Anthony, I'll start with you. And then Vidar, I want to ask how we scale, which is in 2026, I have an idea for either a desktop, a mobile app, some sort of a program, like a technology, right? With this notion that I can go out and build a MVP of this, something very, very simple with vibe coding with a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT. How do I do that? What are the steps that I want to go through? And let's say that you find some early traction there, Anthony. From your perspective, what are the next steps after you've sort of built this MVP and starting to get some traction?
Well, I think the talent is in the choice early upfront. So there's tools like Google Cloud is great. Vercel, I've just recently discovered Vercel, which is they have a free plan that handles a lot of traffic, and then it scales with you as you scale. There's all kinds of hosting platforms that aren't AWS, that aren't a WordPress site, that if you can spend $20 or $30 a month or $100 a month on credits, AI will write it for you and help you deploy it. So I would say ask AI, tell AI what you're thinking about doing, and ask it what's the most cost-effective way to deploy and scale. And there's a lot of really great options for you there. And then also, even like the App Store, Apple's App Store offers free data. Like you can store all your data with Apple, and I don't know if that's what you want to do, but there are ways around paying for stuff up front that will scale for you in a variable way.
But our same question, but Matt, now, okay, maybe we've done that. Maybe we've done a free plan.
Yeah.
And I need to start kind of growing a little bit. I'm bumping up against it. How do I think about building something that is not overly built, but will scale with me?
So I think the main thing people need to look at is, well, what are they actually going to need to scale to? And then you need to have an idea of how rapidly you need to scale, because that is going to be a big part of it. So if you are if you are seeing your demand is going like straight through the roof, then yeah, okay, look at scaling up, building something like proper solid from day one, because you're going to need to be able to scale into a cloud solution if you're seeing demand go like that. Most people don't see demand go like that. They see a much flatter demand curve, and they are going to need to basically look at, well, okay, what's the simplest thing I can add here? And it may well still be that you're using a cloud provider because it's easy for you, and that's fine. But don't build out like in three different regions and over-engineer everything. That's the kind of over-engineering that tends to drive me crazy. It's when people are thinking, okay, well, my demand is, I'm growing 10% month over month now. Well, that's great. But it's not the kind of demand that then requires you to set up a really super complicated system, because it's still manageable to grow with it, and wait until you actually have the revenue for you before you build a big, complicated, expensive solution.
I totally. This reminds me, Chris, of one of the AI first principles, actually, which is optimize value for per resource spent. It's a really simple thing where it's like, if you're scaling across 3 regions across the US in order to save a half a millisecond of time for your users to get it, is that resource to scale across regions worth the value of a half a millisecond?
Yeah. And it's often also, a lot of the time when people do that, it's because they are thinking about, they need to be like 5 nines resilient kind of thing. And
yeah,
they've heard that.
You don't.
Yeah, and exactly, and they've heard that, oh, you need to have three instead of 2, because if you have 3, you need to, you only need to have 50% over capacity in case one of the regions falls out. Whereas if you have 2, you need to be able to handle twice the load. But yeah, you don't need to even handle twice the load, because your customers are going to be fine if things slows down for a while, until you get really big, and that costs you more in customer service than it costs you to, spread things out.
At the heart of this, Vidar, is a really interesting question, which is, I, as the founder, I'm going to build a pitch deck, and I'm going to go show this to VCs, and I'm going to show the fact that the line, Anthony, starts here and then goes there, right? Like it always goes up and to the right. The reality is that user adoption curve, and how people actually use the application is complicated, and you probably aren't going to know that yourself. And you probably need to go talk to somebody like you, Vidar, and say, how does this actually work? How do I figure out, even with my projections, like, I'm thinking in the financial world, the sensitivity analysis of, okay, if this happens, it could be here. How do I do that with user adoption and compute?
Well, so the interesting thing is that I think that's almost overthinking things, because you can go look at of the projections you have, and you can look at, okay, what's your runway going to be? So this is one of the interesting things I learned by actually working for a VC for a while, was obviously you're going to a VC and you're pitching a VC, you're not going to pitch them for cash for 10 years, because cash at an early stage is expensive. The earlier stage, the more expensive the cash, because your valuation is lower. So you are pitching for 2 years or so. And if your demand curve is going straight up within that period, your VCs will be extremely happy to help you with another round. That is not the problem. So at that point, you can throw vast amount of resources at fixing your scaling issue. Now, this is a luxury problem. It's like it's only extremely few cases where you're getting into that kind of situation and you die because you cannot fix the scaling issues you have because people will be throwing money at you. The big challenge is when you're not growing like that and you have burned through like half your cash in the first few months because you're building something crazy ridiculous instead of actually looking at the demand. So I think the reality is that you should just hold back and maybe not worry so much about it until you actually start seeing you get traction, and then talk to somebody like me or anybody that has experience in that space to figure out, well, how do you do that transition smoothly? And often there are really, really simple things you can do to buy you time, right? With one startup I was working at where we had suddenly got some traction, and the simple solution to our server suddenly slowing down was to add like a 1 second cache to one of the most critical, often hit pages, because that capped the number of requests to the backend servers at 1 second, and that was enough for us to be able to handle the rest, right? So don't build for that scale until you see it actually the curve at least starting to trend upwards.
Anthony, I want to give you one more kind of weigh in here before we go to the speed round, which is there's a fundamental principle at work here, which is something where we came up where compute was more expensive, and we really had to be very cautious of that, of don't overbuild for the stage that you're at. And Twitter is the perfect example. We all applauded Twitter for building something crappy that broke all the time, and then got to a scale and then said, okay, great, now go rebuild it. If you can kind of boil that down to a principle for founders, as far as it's not just about software and computing power. How do we make sure that we're not overbuilding for the phase that we're at? How do we make sure that we continue to stretch the capacity of whatever it is that we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to talk a founder out of overbuilding is like trying to talk him out of breathing. Like that's very difficult. But I do think that founders need to put their head in check about, are they building because they don't know what they should be doing, or are they building because there's a strategy behind what they're building? Are they engineering for an end goal, or are they engineering because they don't know how to go to market, or they don't know how to get distribution, or they don't know how to write marketing copy? So figure out why you're building first and what the destination is, and don't talk yourself into it. Don't reverse rationalize it, right? Have the destination that you want to get to and then build to that. That's fine. But don't build to procrastinate the other things that you should be doing.
Back to founder-led sales, Anthony. All right,
founder-led sales.
Are you ready for the speed round? I'm going to change this. The question is, what percentage of cloud spend? I'm just going to say, what percentage of technology or infrastructure spend is a waste for the average startup?
60-70%.
Multi-cloud strategy or single vendor simplicity?
I like multi-cloud strategies as long as it's done to actually streamline things, not if it complicates things too much.
I like it. Auto scaling or fixed capacity with manual intervention?
Oh, I think most people should look at the manual intervention first. And the reason for that is not that auto scaling is bad. It's that there are usually so many low-hanging fruits.
Last one, a vendor offers 40% savings for a 3-year commitment. Sign it?
Yes, but make sure you actually done a price comparison first. You can get massive savings that way.
That's literally what happened to that startup I walked into that Anthony, I didn't build it. I walked in to run it and they had signed a 4-year contract. It's like,
They signed a 4-year contract that was 40% off, but still 3 times more expensive than anybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
So
you.
you need
Yep.
comparison first.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a little bit of PTSD from that moment. Deep Dive Resources, Cloud FinOps by J.R. Stormont and Mike Fuller. The Practice of Cloud System Administration by Thomas Limoncelli, Strata Chalup, and Christina Hogan. But we are going to go talk to you, Vidar. Where can we find out more information? Where can we get your wisdom on this problem?
Well, you can find me at hokstadconsulting.com, or you can search for my name. My name is globally unique, so I have nowhere to hide.
No, that is, again, we're having that conversation. Anthony, who has your name?
A very famous fashion designer, Anthony Franco.
And I have a bass fisherman, a very famous professional bass fisherman. So, there's that. You got a very unique name. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vidar. We really appreciate it. It has been a fun conversation. It's super interesting. Anthony, what do we got coming up? Get us out of here.
Thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. Please be sure to visit us at howtofounder.com, where you can connect with us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify channels. Please hit that like button and subscribe button for us. Leave us a review if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Those reviews really help us. We're growing like crazy. Can't believe it. So appreciate all of you out there for following us. You are the pioneer of economic prosperity, and we're grateful to be there along the way with you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.